The culprit has just been officially identified regarding the plane accident. A UPS McDonnell Douglas MD11 cargo plane, which exploded during takeoff at Louisville Airport in the United States. The million-dollar question is this. Boeing knew, UPS knew about the problem that the MD11 planes had, but nothing was done. Why? That's what this video is about. So, if this is your first time following me, you're on Off.Ntsb Pavo Tips and Hack. Here, we talk about safety in transportation in general, especially when it comes to airplanes, and in particular the well-being and safety of passengers. This is about the accident involving the UPS MD11 cargo plane, which occurred in November 2025 at Louisville Airport. The engine detached during takeoff at rotation. Once the nose of the plane lifted, engine number 1, that is, the left engine, detached from the wing and caused the crash at the airport. But the problem isn't new, because if we look back, we can make a parenthesis about the American Airlines DC-10 accident in 1979, which experienced the same problem. But it's just similarities. It experienced the same problem. And the engine, also the left one, detached during takeoff. Let's make a parenthesis about what happened in that case. But that's not the subject of the video. It's just to show the similarities. During takeoff of the American Airlines DC-10 Flight 191 in Chicago at takeoff, the engine detached and the plane was still able to take off. Once the plane had taken off, the pilots correctly followed their emergency procedures. Unfortunately, they had no idea what had happened on the wing. Unfortunately, when the engine detached, it damaged some hydraulic circuits. This caused the takeoff configuration to change on the left wing, but it did not change on the right wing. That is to say, if you remember when the plane takes off, before the plane actually takes off, if you are sitting next to the wing, you will see that the pilot extends the flaps just a little bit. And at the leading edge, that is, in front of the wing, there is also something that extends. Just like the flaps extend a little bit to the rear, in front on the leading edge, there is something that unfolds as well. It's called slats. That's the takeoff configuration they had. But when the engine detached, due to the way the engine is mounted on the DC-10, when the engine came off, it damaged the hydraulic circuits. Now, by damaging the hydraulic circuits, it also damaged the circuit that controls the slats on the leading edge. During takeoff, since the hydraulic circuit was damaged, the leading edge slats retracted and returned to their original position. However, on the right wing, there was no change. This completely disrupted the balance of the aircraft. On the right, the wing was still in takeoff configuration. But on the left, the wing was no longer in takeoff configuration. So, on the left, the wing lost lift and the plane tilted to the left. The pilot did everything to straighten it out, but it didn't work. He tried to correct it, but since the left wing was losing lift, there was nothing he could do. And the plane tilted, they lost altitude due to the hydraulic problem, and they crashed. Now, what was it caused by? By what? It was caused by improper maintenance procedures in the hangars by the technicians. Unlike other planes, especially modern ones, because unfortunately here, there's a policy of the doctor comes after the death. It's by learning from other accidents that we draw lessons so that it doesn't happen again. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. It's by looking at other accidents that we improve safety for other planes in the future, unfortunately. So during the maintenance of that DC-10 from American Airlines, there's a maintenance procedure used to remove the engine from the wing. But the maintenance team did not use the standard procedure. They took shortcuts. They used a forklift to remove the engine from the plane, which should not be done. That's not the procedure. But by doing that, they caused cracks in the engine and wing mounts. But in these mounts, there are also what are called pylons. The fusible pylons, which will cause problems and which we will discuss in the new situation with the MD11. So this caused cracks, and these cracks are called metal fatigue. It often happens when the metal becomes fatigued. And if it's not detected during inspections, during the aircraft service, if it hasn't exceeded its limits, it's difficult to detect with the naked eye. they use many very sophisticated methods to detect these cracks. So this is called metal fatigue. When metal becomes fatigued, it produces cracks. And if the cracks aren't detected, eventually it will break. That's what happened in the MD11 situation. That's also what we see in other accidents. For example, Tariq R, the propeller part is broken. That's because of metal fatigue. Also with Safa West, metal fatigue. Also the Air France plane in Martinique, which caused the engine surging phenomenon. So it's common. That's why you see pilots, before boarding the plane, walking around the engines. They try to look inside the engines to check for cracks. Because this problem is very common in airplanes, so it needs to be detected in advance. Coming back to the MD11 from McDonnell Douglas is the successor to the DC-10 aircraft. In 1997, when McDonnell Douglas merged with Boeing, the production of the MD11 continued until the year 2000. Now, during routine inspections, because there have been previous incidents on certain aircraft, with the MD11, Boeing identified a problem concerning the engine mounts. It's called the pylon fuse pin. So these are fuse pins that allow the engine to be attached to the pylon, to the engine mount. This pylon has very complex fuse functionalities. If I have time, I'll try to explain what it's all about. So, previously, Boeing found on 3 MD11 aircraft that they already had a metal issue. Fatigue on these pylons, these engine mounts. So, Boeing issued a service letter to all MD11 operators saying that there's a small problem. There's the fuzz pin pylon, which has a minor issue. The problem isn't that serious, but it's important to make sure it's detected early during inspections. If you notice it within a period of less than 2 months, it means there's a problem. And from there, Boeing didn't stop at that. They made a recommendation, and the company that manufactures these fuses developed a solution. The replacement part. But the problem is that the replacement part wasn't mandatory. It wasn't required to replace them. So since they found that it wasn't that serious, that it could be detected with the naked eye, it was neglected. So, the planes kept flying with them. Even if they had a faulty part, they kept going, knowing that, in any case, they had a 2-month warranty. And once you go in for a technical inspection, you can replace the part. So, the new part was not made mandatory for replacement. And that's where the mistake already lies. Because when it comes to safety with airplanes, there's no room for approximation. Not at all. So Boeing issued a letter saying that there was a problem, a defective part. So you need to pay attention to this issue. And unfortunately, the airlines sometimes continued with it, even though there were already new parts, the new part was available. They thought it was fine to keep using the defective part because it wasn't considered that serious. According to how it was presented, it wasn't an emergency, and they kept going like that. And that's why in November 2025, in Louisville, during the takeoff of the UPS MD11, because of metal fatigue in the fuse pin, the engine detached, and you know the rest. The Accident Investigation Bureau in the United States, the NTSB, now turns its attention to the communication between Boeing, the airlines operating MD11s, and the FAA, that is, the American Civil Aviation Authority. Because if they are aware that you have a defective part, what was agreed upon? What happened? Why wasn't the part made mandatory to replace? This is the angle that the NTSB, the Accident Investigation Bureau in the United States, is currently looking into at this moment. And we do not yet have the report on this matter. And since that accident, safety measures regarding the wings and the pins have changed. So this happened with the DC-10 and it happened with the MD-11 in aviation history. It has only happened twice. This goes to show you that once an incident occurs, safety, there are changes that have been made. And today it is practically almost impossible for this to happen because of what has been put in place. The function of this fuse pin, just to make a side note, is to protect the wing of the aircraft. So that's what it normally does in case of a problem. During the breaking of the wing, there are often explosions and there are often strong vibrations. Now, if the vibrations are too strong at a certain level, if the pins detect that with the force impacting this engine, the wing could be torn off, the pin will automatically break. It does this on its own to release the engine at will so that the wing does not break. That's the beauty of this technology.